Welcome. We're going to continue with our discussion on vampires. If you didn't see the previous video, we discussed the lore and kind of the historical aspect of vampires. And now I'm going to tell you some stories about real life historical vampires as well as discuss some from fiction. I will warn you, we're going to talk about Dracula. I haven't read the book yet, but it is on my list. I might get to it this season. I want to read it during spooky season, but I have a lot of books already compiled, so I might not get to it this year, but I have it. It's on my shelf down there. You probably can't. Oh, down there? Somewhere? Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's down there. I have it. I've had it since college and I just haven't had time to read it. So many stories. Okay. So, the first story. I did not know about this story until I was doing research for these videos. But there was an American vampire in the small rural town of Exeter. I'm not really sure how to pronounce this. I looked it up. Rhode Island. Exeteroi, Rhode Island, Exeter. There was a family called the Brown family, and they were struck with a series of deaths due to tuberculosis. There are some words my mouth just doesn't want to form, and that's one of them. Then it was commonly known as consumption, so maybe that's what I will refer to it as. So, consumption was a mysterious and deadly disease that caused severe weight loss, coughing, and a general wasting away of the body. At the time, medical knowledge was limited, and the disease was often misunderstood, as many things were back then. Now, the Brown family, their ordeal began with the death of Mary Eliza, who was Mercy Brown's mother. And Mercy Brown is the person that we were talking to about. Mary Eliza died in 1883. Shortly after, Mercy's sister, Mary Olive, also succumbed to the disease in 1886, so 3 years later. The family was devastated, as you would be, but the worst was yet to come. So Mercy herself fell ill and died on January 17th, 1892, at the age of 19. Disease is no respecter of persons or ages. So her brother Edwin, who had moved to Colorado hoping to recover from his own illness, he hoped the climate would improve his health, but he returned gravely ill. Now, as Edwin's condition worsened, the townspeople of Exeter, and that's just the way I'm going to say it, I apologize if it's wrong, it grew increasingly desperate. Influenced by local folklore and the widespread belief in vampires, they began to suspect that one of the Brown family who had passed away might be a vampire coming back from the grave to drain the life from Edwin. Now, this belief was not uncommon in New England at the time, where there was vampire panic. It was occurring in other communities as well. What they did was on March 17th, 1892, a group of townspeople, including the local doctor and a newspaper reporter, exhumed the bodies of Mary Eliza, Mary Olive, and Mercy Brown. The bodies of Mary Eliza and Mary Olive, they all showed signs of typical decomposition. However, Mercy's body was found to be remarkably well preserved, despite having been buried for over 2 months. Now, there's a little discrepancy here. In one reference of my research, it said that the doctor explained that her decomposition was actually normal. But I think in that one, it might have said it was 2 weeks instead of over 2 months. But it also could have been because of the frigid conditions. I think I have lipstick on my teeth. The frigid conditions would have preserved her body, like you put something in the freezer. We mentioned this in our previous video. You put something in the freezer, it doesn't go rotten, at least for a while. So, despite his potential reassurances that She was perfectly normal. It was okay. The townspeople saw it as evidence of vampirism. So convinced she was a vampire, the townspeople took drastic measures. They removed her heart and liver, which were found to contain liquid blood, further fueling their suspicions. And like we talked about in our previous video, when it was found that your hair and nails continued to grow for a while after passing away, people became suspicious of undeadness. And this just further contributes to that. Blood can live in the body for a while after it's stopped working. But anyway, they were convinced that this meant she was a vampire. So they burned her organs on a nearby rock, and the ashes were mixed with water to create a tonic. This really gross and gruesome concoction was given to Edwin to drink. So, rotting organs. Yummy. In the hope that it would cure him from the vampire's influence. Unfortunately, the ritual did not save Edwin. He died a few months later on May 2nd, 1892. And the story of Mercy Brown, it's so interesting and really gives you insight into the psychology of people and just how not knowing how things work can have such a huge influence over your beliefs and actions. It's become a local legend. Well, even then, it became a local legend and was reported in newspapers across the country. And now it remains one of the most famous cases of vampire folklore in America and has inspired some works of fiction, including Bram Stoker's Dracula. I didn't know that this was one of his inspirations. But honestly, I didn't even know that this existed. It's not like we study vampires in school or whatever. So, and I don't live in New England or even on the East Coast, so I had never heard of it. But speaking of Dracula, we are now going to do a summary of his story. Because honestly, Dracula. At least most people do. Some people don't. But regardless, you hear Dracula and like there were 3 brides, or the Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman kind of follows a little bit along. Not really well, but we're going to go ahead and just give a little breakdown. We're going to talk about Dracula. So, okay, the story begins with a man named Jonathan Harker. He was a young English solicitor traveling to Transylvania to help Count Dracula with a real estate transaction because vampires want to buy land too. Harker went there to help Dracula purchase an estate called Carfax Abbey. The fact it was an abbey is really interesting, all things considered. This was in England, and upon arriving at Dracula's castle, Harker quickly realized that he was a prisoner. During Harker's stay at the castle, it's filled with strange and terrifying experiences. He discovers Dracula's a vampire, a creature that feeds on human blood, just in case you didn't know. Harker also encounters 3 female vampires known as the Brides of Dracula. They nearly seduce and kill him, so obviously monogamy is not a thing with Dracula having 3 brides, but apparently it doesn't count for them either. But Harker managed to escape the castle and makes his way back to England, but traumatized, because why wouldn't you be? You were a prisoner, tortured, vampires. Some people might find that a good time. Harker did not. Meanwhile, Dracula travels to England aboard a ship called the Demeter. The ship arrives in Whitby. I think it's Whitby, not Whitby. Whitby, England, with its crew mysteriously dead. I wonder who could have done it. Dracula begins his reign of terror in England. He preys on a woman engaged to Harker's friend called Lucy Westenra. Harker's friend and her fiance is Arthur Holmwood. With Dracula having set his eyes on her, Lucy's health deteriorates rapidly. And despite the efforts of a Dr. John Seward and his mentor, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, she dies and becomes a vampire. Because 3's not enough for Dracula. He's a cult leader. That explains everything. Okay. Van Helsing and his group, which include Harker, the fiance, who also is the solicitor. Harker, the solicitor who was imprisoned, his fiance Mina Murray, Arthur Holmwood, his friend, who was engaged to the woman that Dracula just spirited away, Dr. Seward, and an American named Quincy Morris, represent, vow to destroy Dracula. They track down Lucy's vampiric form and sadly destroy her by driving a stake through her heart, cutting off her head and filling her mouth with garlic. I don't know what filling her mouth with garlic was supposed to do. I've always understood it to be more of a repellent thing. It might burn you a little bit. Maybe if it's the burning thing, it just like shovels away what's remaining of the head. I don't know. Theories. With Lucy's death, Dracula turns his attention to Mina, Harker's fiance. He begins to prey on her, so Mina starts to exhibit symptoms of vampirism. The group realizes what's going on and decide they have to do something. Save her. Using hypnosis, Van Helsing is able to establish a psychic link with Dracula through Mina, which helps them track him down, figure out where he's at. The group follows Dracula back to Transylvania. They split up, and with Van Helsing and Mina heading to Dracula's castle because mind link, while the others pursue the vampire's coffin. And I don't know if this is a thing or if it's just a Dungeons and Dragons thing, but if you play D&D and you don't know this and you're about to go play Strahd or something, I have a tip. Don't meta though. Vampires, you can unalive them, but if their misty form gets back to their coffin, they can regenerate. Don't let it happen. Back to the story. They go find his coffin. Van Helsing and Mina destroy the brides of Dracula and purify the castle. Like, I don't know if they have sage or holy water, but they purify it. The rest of the group intercepts Dracula's coffin just before sunset. In a final battle, Harker and Morris manage to destroy Dracula by driving a knife through his heart and cutting his throat. Morris is mortally wounded in the fight, but lives long enough to see Dracula destroyed. And remember, Morris is the American representation. He died a tragic way, but he saw it through. He's the only one who died. Aside from Lucy and Dracula and the three brides. But out of the team, he was the only one who perished. With Dracula's death, Mina is freed from the vampire's curse. The novel ends with a note from Harker recounting the events and expressing hope for the future. The group returns to England and life slowly returns to normal and probably live happily ever after. Dracula has found impact on popular culture. It shaped the way the modern image of the vampire is. Okay, I'm going to ruin it for you. I don't know if I mentioned in the previous video, but I wasn't specific. I'm going to read to you what the internet says what Dracula looks like in the novel, not the film. We've switched over to dark mode. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, Count Dracula is described as having a thin, gaunt form. We know he's pale. That's not changed. He has a large Victorian mustache, so not clean shaven like you always see him. And to be fair, a Victorian mustache back then was probably very attractive. He had pointed ears, which elves are hot. They have pointed ears. That's okay. Sharp teeth. I don't know if they specify what teeth are sharp. Is it all of them, like in Underworld, I think it is? Is it just the ones that are popularized in most shows and stuff? Or is it like, my husband told me the name of this one, where it's like the two front teeth are pointy. It's not. I don't know if it says it in the novel, but it doesn't tell me on the internet. He had blue eyes, which is fine. They would turn red when he was angry, though. So at least there's like an emotion detector happening. He always wore black, and his age. It varies throughout the novel, but initially, he is described as an old man. I mean, he's also probably hundreds of years old, so he's cold to the touch. And this one was weird. He has a thin nose with high nostrils. He's probably related to Voldemort. And, okay, two more things that are not cute. I'm sorry. Hairy hands. Now, I'm not saying hairy hands are a bad thing. My husband is a very hairy gentleman. He's my grizzly bear. This was described as like a carpet. If you have a carpet on your hands, I'm sorry. If it's soft, that might be nice. But he also had really pointy fingernails, like claws. Now this one. His eyebrows. Look, I know I shouldn't talk. I have naturally thin eyebrows. But here's the thing. They were large. So big that they almost meet. Oh, I misread this. Okay, so he had a unibrow. That's fine. Unibrows are actually, I think they're kind of cute. I thought the way this was described when I first read it was that his eyebrows came all the way down to the tip of his nose. To me, that would have been really gross. I just thought it was down here. I thought he had really long eyebrows. Dang. All right. Anyway, Dracula, not particularly conventionally attractive. Hands. And old man. And here's the thing. Some gentlemen age very well. Being old doesn't equate to unattractive. But he's preying on young women, and that's not okay. We're going to move on to Elizabeth Bathory. Now, I had heard about her a while ago, but she actually became more on my radar when I started playing Fate Go, the anime mobile app. I watched the anime first and then all of that. Anyway, she's like this little demon countess who regrets her actions, I guess. Now, this story's interesting because it might not be true. Elizabeth Bathory was born on August 7th, 1560. She's a Leo like me. It's okay. Less okay if she actually did do all of this, but here we go. Into one of the most powerful Protestant noble families in Hungary. Her family controlled vast lands in Transylvania, and her uncle, Stephen Bathory, was the king of Poland. Elizabeth was raised in the family castle, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, in Ecsed, Hungary. Ecsed. There's a little over the E. And she was privileged in her education. She learned multiple languages, studied science, which is really cool, especially for, a time period that is confusing when it comes to the education of women and their rights, and also the arts, which that's pretty typical. At the age of 15, in 1575, Elizabeth married Count Ferenc Nadasti, a member of another influential Hungarian family. As a wedding gift, she received a castle. I will try to pronounce this once and refer to it as her castle throughout the rest of her story. Castle Kachis, which was located in what is now Slovakia. The couple, they had 4 children between 1585 and 1595, so about a 10-year period. It's about every 2 years, it's normal. Okay, Ferenc was often fighting wars, leaving Elizabeth to manage their estates and affairs. After Ferenc's death in 1604, rumors of Elizabeth's cruelty began to surface. Initially, these rumors involved the mistreatment of her servants, but they soon escalated to accusations of torture and murder. It was said that Elizabeth, along with her accomplices, servants who couldn't say no to her, but maybe enjoyed it too, tortured and unalived hundreds of young girls, mostly peasants who were lured to the castle with promise of work. And like on one hand, you think, cool, I get to go work at a castle and serve this. Wait, was she a countess or a duchess? Uh, it doesn't matter. Let's kind of okay. Go serve this lady, and help with their family. Keep them afloat, fed, clothed, sheltered, all those things. I don't know if people knew about the disappearances that were happening, but that would have been scary if they did. In 1610, King Matthias II, I think it's Matthias, not Matthias, right? It's Matthias. He ordered an investigation into the allegations against Elizabeth. Okay, it's either Georgi or Georgi. Georgi. I think it's Georgi. Georgi Thurzo, the Palatine of Hungary, led the inquiry. Witnesses testified to seeing multiple bodies and hearing screams from the castle. Some accounts claim that Elizabeth bathed in the blood of virgins to retain her youth, although this particular detail is likely a later embellishment. But here's the thing. As someone who is anemic and needs to take iron, the pallor of your skin can go really pale without that extra oomph to your blood to kind of blush up your cheeks. And so if Elizabeth had this problem being in the iron, the blood, it would have maybe helped. So potentially. On December 30th, 1609, Elizabeth and her servants were arrested. The servants were put on trial in 1611 and were executed for their roles in the murders. Elizabeth, however, was never formally tried. Instead, she was confined to a room in her castle where she was kept under house arrest. Elizabeth died on August 21st, 1614, at the age of 54. She was buried in the church of her castle, but her body was later moved to her family's crypt in Exed. I hope I'm saying that right. The true extent of her crimes remains a topic of debate among historians. And here's the thing. Some people believe that she was a victim of politically motivated conspiracy to seize her lands and wealth, and that she might have never done this. Who knows? But, yeah, pretty typical that your subordinates would take the fall for your bad actions, while you just sit in a castle and live out the rest of your life quietly. Over the centuries, Elizabeth Bathory's story has become intertwined with folklore and legend. She's often depicted as a vampire-like figure, never actually stated as a vampire, but historically she's, kind of referred to as one. And her tale has inspired numerous books, films, and the image of the Blood Countess continues to captivate and horrify, making her one of history's most infamous figures, whether she deserves it or not. Carmilla is a Gothic novel by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. It was first published in 1872, and it is one of the earliest works of vampire fiction, which has significant influence over the genre, and you'll see why. The story is narrated by Laura, who is a young woman living in a remote castle in Styria, which is modern-day Austria, with her father. Laura begins by recounting a strange dream she had as a child, in which she was visited by a beautiful young girl. This dream leaves a lasting impression on her, foreshadowing. One day, a carriage accident occurs near Laura's home. Inside is a young woman named Carmilla. She's injured, and her mother is in a hurry, so she leaves Carmilla in the care of Laura's family, promising to return for her later. Laura and Carmilla quickly become friends, and Laura is struck by Carmilla's beauty and charm. As time passes, Laura begins to experience strange dreams and a decline in her health. Sound familiar? She often dreams of a large cat-like creature attacking her. Meanwhile, other women in the area fall ill and die under mysterious circumstances. Laura's father becomes concerned and consults a doctor because of Laura's illness, and the doctor's puzzled by her symptoms. Then Laura's father receives a visit from General Spielsdorf, an old friend who has lost his niece to a similar mysterious illness. Howlick. The general recounts how his niece was befriended by a beautiful woman named Millarca, who bears a striking resemblance to Carmilla. He reveals that Millarca was a vampire and that he had to destroy her to save his niece. But if it's Carmilla, how did she come back? We don't know. I haven't read the book. Maybe I should just every year choose one of these books and read them. The general, Laura's father, and a group of men set out to find Carmilla's tomb. They discover her. They discover she is actually Carmilla. Spoiler alert, sorry. Or Countess Karnstein, a vampire who has been preying on young women for centuries. They locate her tomb, open it, find her body perfectly preserved, and to end her reign of terror, they drive a stake through her heart, cut off her head, and burn her remains. This is pretty much the way that you gotta do it, because we'll see in one of our later stories a couple of the other things that are supposed to work might not. So with Carmilla destroyed, Laura's health gradually returns, and the strange occurrences cease. However, Laura is left with a lingering sense of unease and the memory of her intense, unsettling relationship with Karma haunts her forever, or at least until she dies of natural causes. Carmilla, the story Carmilla, is notable for actually exploring themes of same-sex sexuality, and other things that are in vampire stories, like the supernatural and the blurred lines between love and predation. Because in all these stories, at least these original stories, vampires are predators. And it has also inspired numerous adaptations and remains a cornerstone of vampire literature. This is actually one I think I really want to read. It's called The Vampire with a Y. 80 years before Dracula in 1819, John Polidori, an Anglo-Italian physician, published a novel called The Vampire with a Y. The story begins with the introduction of Lord Ruthven. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I might, for these next two, roll my R's. It's not intentional, but it also makes some of these a little easier to say. So anyway, Ruthven, there, see. He's a mysterious and charismatic nobleman who becomes the talk of London society. Probably pretty cute. And since he does predate Dracula, maybe that's where pretty vampires come from. He's aloof, and his enigmatic presence and demeanor intrigue many, including a wealthy orphan named Aubrey. Now, I was really confused when I first started reading this because Aubrey is in fact a man. The only Aubrey I've ever met is a girl. So a little down here I was very confused when he was using he, him pronouns, and I thought that this was a woman, but Aubrey is a man, and he's fascinated by Ruthven. He decides to accompany him on a grand tour of Europe, and during their travels, Aubrey begins to notice Ruthven's peculiar. He seems to take a perverse pleasure in corrupting innocent the innocent and virtuous, so corrupting victims. He often involved himself with gamblers and those of questionable morals, which that was a pretty strict definition in this time period, pre-Victorian, potentially Victorian. I don't know. In Rome, Aubrey receives a letter from his guardians warning him about Ruthven's sinister reputation. And disturbed by this, Aubrey decides to part ways with Ruthven, and he just continues on his journey alone, eventually arriving in Greece. There, he meets and falls in love with a beautiful and innocent, because they always are, local girl named Iantha. I hope it's pretty the way I'm saying it. I just hope it's correct. Anyway, she tells him about the local legends of vampires, creatures that prey on blood from the living. And Aubrey's intrigued but skeptical. And then one night, while returning from an excursion, Aubrey is caught in a storm and seeks shelter in a nearby hut. There, he witnesses Iantha being attacked and killed by a vampire. He's devastated. This was the love of his life, and soon discovers that Ruthven's actually arrived in Greece. He claims to have been mortally wounded by bandits and makes Aubrey swear an oath not to reveal anything about him or his death for a year and a day. And I don't know if there was any of that vampiric power going on to enforce this oath, or if they really took their oath seriously during this time. But Ruthven then seemingly dies from his injuries. And I'm wondering if the inference here is that he's the one who attacked Ruthven's girlfriend, and he was injured in the process. Like maybe she fought back or something. But regardless, he dies. So Aubrey returns to London, haunted by his loss and his experiences. And then to his shock, finds that Ruthven's alive and there. He's moving in the same social circles as before, as if nothing has happened. And his presence drives Aubrey to the brink of madness, especially when he starts to court his sister. Like, talk about betrayal. Now, Aubrey tries to warn his sister about Ruthven, but his oath prevents him from revealing the truth. Again, either because of vampiric influence or just because they really took their oath seriously. I don't know. But as the year and day pass, Aubrey's health deteriorates and he becomes increasingly desperate. He really wants to save his sister from this man. And on the day the oath expires, he writes a letter revealing all of this and Ruthven's true nature to his sister, but it's too late. They're married, and then Aubrey dies from the strain of his efforts. So, very sad. That's the end. The story concludes with revelation that Ruthven has disappeared with Aubrey's sister, leaving behind a trail of death and despair. This is a tale of horror and tragedy, exploring themes of corruption, innocence, and, of course, the supernatural. And out of all of them is the one that has the sad ending. I mean, there's sadness in all of these stories, but this one actually, the good guys don't win. Our last story. All right. 17th century, and supposedly the first vampire, at least recorded. Jor Grando Alilovic. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. I'm trying really hard. He's perhaps, like I said, the first vampire in history. His is a fascinating and frankly eerie tale. It's spooky from the 17th century and is considered one of the earliest documented cases of a vampire. So here's the story. Jor, and I'm just going to call him Jor because the rest of his name, aside from Grando, is a little hard to say. But anyway, he was also known as Giore Grando. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. He was a villager from Kringa, a small town in the Istrian Peninsula of modern-day Croatia. He was born in 1579, lived a relatively ordinary life as a stonesmason, married to a woman named Ivana, with whom he had 2 children, Anna and Nicola. I really like the name Nicola. I think it's cute. In 1656, Jure, he passed away and was buried in the local cemetery. However, his death was only the beginning of his story. Here it goes. According to legend, for 16 years after his death, Jure rose from his grave at night to terrorize the villagers. He was referred to as a strigon, which was a local term for a vampire or warlock. The villagers reported hearing knocks on their doors at night, and whoever's door was knocked on would die within a few days. Whether he, was responsible with his vampiricness or they just passed away from natural causes, I'm not sure. But his widow, Ivana, claims that he would appear in her bedroom looking as though he was smiling and gasping for breath, because that's not super creepy. There's a gnat in here. I want that to go away. And he would essay her. And yes, you can essay your significant other or partner. Okay? No is no. Consent is a must. That's just the way it is. The village priest, Father Giorgio, maybe, who had buried Jur, eventually encountered the vampire. Holding a cross, here we go. This is what I've been talking about. He confronted Jur, shouting, "Behold, Jesus Christ, you vampire. Stop tormenting us." And despite this, the vampire continued his nightly visits. So that was ineffective. The villagers, led by the prefect Miho Radetic, decided to take action. They attempted to pierce Jur's heart with a hawthorn stick, but it simply bounced off his chest. So, in our last video, we talked about hawthorn being one of the woods used in many lore, but in this case, it was not effective, determined to end this terror and the hauntings and all of the craziness. 9 villagers, including Father Giorgio, gathered one night with lamps, a cross, and the hawthorn stick. They dug up Jur's coffin and found his corpse perfectly preserved with a smile on its face. This smile thing is creepy. Father Giorgio once again invoked the name of Jesus, but the hawthorn stick still could not penetrate Jur's flesh. Finally, hard and true method. One of the villagers, Stepan Milasek, took a saw and decapitated his corpse. As soon as the saw struck his skin, George screamed and blood flowed from the cut. And this act finally brought peace to the village. The story of Jur Grando was documented by Johann Weikart on Von Valvasor in his work The Glory of the Duchy of Carniola, making it one of the first written accounts of a vampire. This tale has since become a significant part of vampire folklore and continues to intrigue and terrify those who hear it. And frankly, to me, it's the creepiest of them. Gasping for air, creepy smile, just looming there and being weird. I don't know. It's creepy. All right. Those were our stories. There are so many vampire stories though. So, frolic, enjoy. If you know of any vampire stories that are intriguing or I don't know, just you have cool vampire stories, put them in the comments. I'd like to go look at them and research, and maybe we'll do another vampire story time. But for now, that is it. Comment below your favorite vampire story, who your favorite vampire is. If you don't like vampires, that's okay too. Everybody has their thing and not thing, so maybe this is one of your not things. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun. And our next one will be in October, and I'm excited for it. Think pumpkin. It'll be great. All right, I will see you all later. Bye. sorry. I'm actually my my degree was in theater and vocal performance. Well, I guess theater was my degree. Vocal performance and creative writing were my, I guess technically clusters, but minor. So I get theatrical. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. It's just the way I am.